a warm welcome today to Brittany Kaiser. She has got an extremely extensive track record in the blockchain world, in privacy and data protection. Looking forward to hear her perspective and insights and thoughts. Maybe we can start with some of her background, how she got started, her difficulties along the way, what she learned, and then maybe her vision for the future. And we'll ask a few questions and then open it up to the audience. So please put your hands together for Brittany.
Wonderful. Well, I couldn't be more happy at the state of the world today. One of the most important and viral topics on the front page of, or I guess the landing page of every media agency, trending on every single social media platform, is NFTs, which is digital ownership. For about 4 years, I have spent most of my time traveling around the world trying to explain to people the importance of being able to own your data, being able to actually own and even possess as your property digital assets. This has been a crusade that I suppose I've been on full time in a number of different areas. And it's so exciting that somehow, I thought we were still a couple of years away from this, but somehow we have entered the zeitgeist. We've entered into an era where everyone around the world is starting to understand what it actually means to own digital property. And that is so incredibly exciting for me. For the past many years, I've been working on this in 3 different ways, which is education, legislation, and then technology advisory. On the educational front, I think most of us can agree that the world is not incredibly digitally literate, which means that most of us were not taught in school how technology works. We were just taught to use technology. Or maybe we weren't even taught it in school at all. And we had to learn it for ourselves, which is just basic functionality, not actually learning how it works. So I think it's incredibly important that these days, we're not just taught how technology actually works, but we're taught how to be successful online, as well as how to protect ourselves. What are our data rights? What are basic cybersecurity protocols? What are ways to protect your mental and physical health when using technology and not be addicted to devices? How can we manage our digital footprint? How can we be good digital citizens? These are all questions that we should be able to answer. And we're finally starting to get there, and I can explain that a little bit later. On the legislative front, for years, I've been working on the first digital asset definitions, helping a lot of governments, both states and federally in the US, as well as many other countries, to write their first data protection and privacy laws, but also their first blockchain laws. Because in the end, all of this is just, how do countries allow us to own and use digital assets? How do they allow us to trade them? What types of protections do we have? And that is the same for personal data, as well as blockchain tokens and technology. It's just ones and zeros and how encrypted they are or not. And on the technology front, been specifically working on helping companies that are developing solutions to data protection, privacy, opt-in consent mechanisms. Obviously now, smart contracting is probably one of my favorite things to be working on. Personal data monetization, and other forms of digital ownership like NFT platforms. So I suppose it might be helpful to explain how I got to this place. I really started my early career studying as a human rights lawyer. So I spent about a decade training as a human rights barrister in the United Kingdom, and spending a lot of time specifically working in legislative drafting and lobbying in human rights law. So I spent a lot of time in The Hague, Strasbourg, Geneva, Brussels, working on a lot of these international agreements, with organizations that were trying to enshrine individual rights in law and find ways for us to protect and enforce those individual rights. And I really came to technology while I was on that journey. I started to get pretty political, as a human rights activist, and started to align with certain politicians that I particularly thought that the way that they were going about their campaigns, the policies that they were wanting to implement, would be more helpful to the cause of human rights globally. And so the first ever presidential campaign I worked on was for Barack Obama. I was at Edinburgh University in Scotland at the time, and I quit college to move back home to Chicago and work at headquarters for Barack. And that was the first time that I really got deep into technology and into data science. I joined the new media team when there were just 5 of us. It was me and Chris Hughes, the co-founder of Facebook, and a handful of other people. And we built the first ever tools to take data from social media and to start to use that for political targeting. We invented what is now widely known as social media strategy. At the time, it was new media because no one had used social media for anything besides privately messaging your friends from college. So it was the first time where we were starting to realize that the more information we could take from social media, the more we could create targeted communications and start to really build algorithms that helped us understand who we talk to, how we talk to them. And all of a sudden, we're seeing exponential engagement and returns. We're seeing millions of people register to vote for the first time. We're seeing millions of people actually talking about things that they had never gotten involved in before, but things that were obviously important to them and their families. And so I thought, well, technology is the way that we are going to get a civically engaged and active population. And so therefore, technology must be a net positive, right? You could call me naive, or you could call me eternally optimistic, which is what I prefer. And that's really the way that I saw the possibilities of what technology could do for us in the world. And so instead of joining the Obama White House, which is what most of us were offered, I decided to use what I had learned on the Obama campaign and travel the world working with a lot of the human rights organizations that I really respected, teaching them how to use the tools that we had just created for the presidential campaign. And so I was doing United Nations consultancies, working for Amnesty International, working for human rights research organizations, even charities and nonprofits that were smaller and didn't have much of a budget, and teaching them how to use these tools. So how could you use social media and digital marketing in order to reach people? How could you take advantage of these new types of technologies to make sure that the important things that you are trying to do for the world are actually heard and actually have that impact? How do you get those donors? How do you get that that base of people who actually support your campaigns? And so I saw that as probably one of the most impactful things that I could do, which is to combine my love for human rights, individual rights, and galvanize people around those types of issues. Now, for those of you that already knew who I was, you might know me as the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower. That's because not long after I spent many years teaching these tools to human rights organizations, I started writing my PhD in something called preventive diplomacy. I was based in London. And what that actually means is, how do you prevent crisis from happening before it does, especially mass violence? I'm a specialist in preventing crimes against humanity, also punishing that, and wanted to figure out how we could use diplomatic engagement, how we could use politics to actually head those things off before they happen, as opposed to sending people to the International Criminal Court for 5 or 6 years and you still don't know if you're going to win a case. And what my entire PhD ended up being about, instead of diplomatic strategy, was actually data science. So I found out through my research that the more data that you have, the easier it is to predict things, which is what I started to learn on the Obama campaign, but it really solidified it in my mind once you start to realize that's how governments and militaries start to do their own predictive modeling. That's how companies even do risk analysis. How much data can you get, and who's modeling it? How is that information being analyzed? And how quickly is it getting to decision makers so that they can decide to head off those conflicts before they start? And it was really about how much data was available and how good those data scientists were, what types of modeling they were doing. And so when I really came to realize that that's more what it was about than diplomatic strategy, I thought, I'm in over my head. I don't know enough about data science. No one at my law school could teach me about advanced predictive analytics. So I joined Cambridge Analytica to finish my PhD. And while I was there, I learned a lot more about data than I bargained for. And a couple of those things are really pertinent to the industry that I'm in now, which is I learned very quickly that the amount of information that you could easily obtain about people was not just something that seemed to be a violation of basic rights, but really gave whoever was doing the data collection much more power than the individual that the data had been taken from. And this seemed to be completely against most of the things that I had worked for in my life, which is to protect rights, to make things transparent for people, to allow people to have a choice about what they want in life. And I realized if I'm at this small startup company that still is spending millions of dollars a year on data, what are big companies doing? What are governments doing? It reminded me of, the 2013 revelations of Edward Snowden, when he started to explain to the world exactly how unprotected we are and how easy it is for all of our information to be collected. And as I'm seeing at my small tech startup, there is more data about you than you could ever imagine. When I was looking at data sets about myself, I was mind blown that some of those things were even being collected. And as time went on there, I realized not all the projects that this company was doing were, neutral or net positive. Obviously, the first thing I was shown when I got there was a project for NATO, where they were helping train all allied militaries on how to stop young people from being recruited into ISIS. So the first thing that I saw was, wow, this is definitely a net positive. Again, it's me being eternally optimistic, thinking, oh, wow, if you can stop young people from sneaking themselves into Syria using data science, wow, that's pretty amazing. And I want to learn how to use this. But over the years, I started to see that there were more and more clients that were working with the company that didn't exactly have the world's best interests at heart. And that even if you could legally do something with data, maybe you still shouldn't be able to. It might be legal, but it might not be ethical, might not be moral. Maybe it shouldn't be legal at all. And after raising plenty of red flags within the company, saying, okay, well, what this client wants us to do in this country, I'm not sure if we can do it. I need a data protection officer to be hired. Or, okay, we're going to propose to do this with this client. Can I call our lawyers and figure out what is okay, what is legal in that country, especially when we're working in European countries that have more stringent data laws. Most places we were working around the world had no data laws at all, but Europe definitely had figured that out in the aftermath of World War II. And so I started to see more and more red flags and thought, okay, maybe this isn't the place for me. Around my final months there, I started working specifically on initiatives to help create transparency and accountability within data. And I became obsessed with blockchain technology. I had my first Bitcoins in 2011. I was well versed in what was going on in the industry, and you know, even that I suppose is the first time that Michael and I met without meeting, because I donated all my first Bitcoins to WikiLeaks. Actually, if Michael can maybe tell you the story of how that connects us back in the day, but I really thought that by the time that 2017 came around, that the mechanics of the Bitcoin network, blockchain technology in general, was going to be the way that we could solve a lot of the problems that I had seen in the data industry. That through distributed ledger technology, that we would actually have the ability to provide that transparency to people, that opt-in, the choice of using something like smart contracts to have specific permissions on, if you're going to share your data, what you would allow to be done with it, whose hands would actually be able to touch that data, what would they be able to do with it or not, and how can you choose that? And if they're going to monetize it, because this was really what blew my mind, was how expensive the data industry was, how this was a multi-trillion-dollar industry very easily, when my small startup was spending millions of dollars a year on it. And why were none of us, the producers of the world's most valuable asset, which was estimated in 2017 to have, by the economists, to have surpassed oil and gas, how are we just giving all of this away for free? So data monetization through smart contracting especially was something that I began to become pretty obsessed with, and really thought that that was the way that we could solve a lot of these problems. So I actually left Cambridge Analytica to go full-time into blockchain technology, because the CEO of Cambridge Analytica told me to shut up about blockchain technology and concentrate on data science. So I told him he didn't know what he was talking about and that it was time for us to part ways. And I left not to become a whistleblower at first. I left because I thought that there was something better for me to do with my legal and technical education and experience. And so I left Cambridge in order to fly to Wyoming, because Brock Pierce had introduced me to Caitlin Long. And I saw that she was writing the first ever positive blockchain laws in the United States. And I really wanted to get involved. So what I did was fly there, and she taught me how to lobby in the state of Wyoming. I had lobbied in Brussels and Geneva, but I had never lobbied in like a state Congress in the US, because I had lived in Europe for 14 years. And she taught me what to do. And we started working on teaching legislators and regulators what blockchain technology is, what a digital asset is, what it actually means to own your data as intangible personal property, what it means to give people transparency and opt-in and permission structures for their own digital assets. And that was something that was just so exciting to me, because even legislators that had obviously not used much technology in their lives, some of them were older, some of them were full-time cattle ranchers their whole lives, and technology had not played a lot of roles for them. But it was really easy to kind of land the plane and explain to people, especially in Wyoming, where most people just care about their rights very specifically and protecting their rights and freedoms, to explain to them how important this was to protect people's rights and freedoms, and that we needed to have these laws, we needed to have these regulations. And you know, I while I was going through that process, we passed the first ever positive blockchain laws in the United States, and I became a whistleblower during that process when I found out that my company that I had worked for many years had you know, done a few more things than I had realized while I was there, and I still had my work computer. So I decided to start working with, again, legislators and regulators to teach them about technology and how it works. What is it, advanced predictive analytics? How does people how do people actually start to have some rights around their personal information that is constantly collected about them and has been collected about them since they first ever touched technology. And so through the past few years, as I said, when I opened up this talk, what I realized was that we can solve these problems and that it is possible to make sure that people are not manipulated with their own personal information, that their data cannot get into the hands of anybody and cannot be used for any purpose. But it really does take a combination of education and awareness, new legislation and regulation, and then of course the development of emerging technologies like, advanced forms of encryption and blockchain technology, and in general ways to make technology more transparent and accessible so that people can understand what choice they're making when they use technology. And so I've been working across those three ways that I really see in parallel to solve this problem. And where we are today is that we have this huge opportunity to change the way that technology has been built. The technology industry has been built to be extractive. I actually call it kleptocratic, which is that it is meant to take as much away from you as possible. That is literally how most technologies have been built. Collect as much data from you as possible in as many sneaky ways as possible. And now we actually have the ability to flip that on its head and give people their rights and their choice back. I see that Michael's raised his hand, so I'm going to pause here so he can ask some questions while we still have time together. So thank you, Michael.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Brittany. That was amazing. We have a question from Myra. First, I'm so inspired by your choices and accomplishments. Could you talk a little bit about best practices to protect our data, please?
Absolutely. So again, it starts with education and awareness. So actually understanding how technology works. It's very important to realize that every single thing that you're touching when you're using a device is collecting data from you, and being aware that every application, every platform that you decide to use is collecting data. And it's your responsibility. Unfortunately, it's not made easy these days, but it's starting to get better. It is your responsibility to understand what is going to be taken from you, because companies on purpose have not made it easy. So I highly recommend a certain set of first steps, because not everybody spends their time being obsessed with privacy by design technologies. So I think it's really important for you to firstly read some of the terms and conditions of the platforms and applications that you use every day. Have an actual understanding of what is being taken from you. And I know that terms and conditions are not easy to read. I could get a show of hands of how many people actually even have ever read terms and conditions instead of just clicking the box and going forward once you've downloaded something, or trying to get a box out of the way and clicking yes when you're looking at a new website for cookies. But it's important, even if you're not a lawyer, to try to read that legalese, because most of what's in there does explain to you what is being taken from you. Unfortunately, with platforms like Facebook, there's a lot of stuff that they take that isn't even in the terms and conditions, which is why they keep on ending up in court and in Congress. But in general, most of the apps that you're trying to use every day will explain to you what they're taking. And so you need to decide if you're comfortable with that or not. Also, likely most of the apps that you're using, you are allowing more data to be taken than the apps actually require for functionality. So it means they're taking extra information from you and selling that to maybe hundreds or thousands of other companies. So look in the apps that you really feel that you need, and look in the choices. So you can actually sometimes uncheck boxes or toggle them off and say, okay, I don't want to share this data except for the essential data for apps functioning. Because what you'll soon realize is that you probably don't need most of the apps on your phone. You might have downloaded it once to read a menu at a new restaurant, or you downloaded something in order to order one item, but it's not actually something you need anymore. You don't know anything about the developers who built it or the company who created it. And you're likely giving that company access to all of the data you create in other apps, and access to your photos, your contacts, your videos, access to your microphone and your camera whenever they want to turn it on 24/7, your live location. You probably want to stop doing that if at all possible, for as many apps on your phone as you can. I'm down to like a very basic, about like 15 apps on my phone. And before I started thinking about this, I realized I had over 100 apps on my phone. Most of them I hadn't used in months. And so it's really important to just clean that out and think about what you really need. And sometimes you can delete an app, and if you need it again sometime soon, you can re-download it, use it, and then delete it again. You don't need to have it constantly installed on your phone. So start to just be aware of that stuff. I think that's super important. Also, you can make easy choices about using more privacy by design technologies. You know, you could use Signal instead of WhatsApp or regular text. You can use Brave browser instead of Google Chrome. You can use voice.com instead of Facebook. There are a lot of options there for you. And I think it's really important for you to just start to exercise that awareness and start to think about what you're actually doing, as opposed to blindly clicking the terms and conditions box, blindly accepting cookies, and not actually thinking about what that means for you. Because all of these data breaches that are happening every day are only going to get worse. Um, and so it's important for you to start to think about what you're giving away too easily, and the few steps that you could take to start protecting yourself in a more active way.
Amazing. We have time for maybe about 2 more questions. So one question here from Petra, really nice. How do we as normal users use NFTs to protect our data and favorite platforms? And another question is like, what's your dream vision for the future? Like, how can this new world look like, where data is much more protected and people are much more aware?
Two of my favorite questions. So great. One of them is so the first question: how can you protect your data using NFTs? So I have recently come together with this amazing group of people, and we started something called the NFT Foundation. And we are a group of influencers, artists, musicians, celebrities, et cetera, and so forth, that we help charities and nonprofits raise a lot of money by launching NFT collections. And so I have spent a lot of time over the past couple of months working with almost every NFT platform you can think of. Most of them are pretty similar in terms of what they allow you to do. Some of them allow you to do some more complex things, but in general, what NFTs allow you to do is use smart contracting in order to decide what types of rights and royalties and other types of legal stipulations and even technical stipulations that you want to put into digital content. So if you want to sell an NFT, for example, you can create, a digital painting or a short video or something like that, or even a documentary. Or you can sell the advertising rights, for example, to a song. There are so many different options. And what you use a smart contract for is, instead of writing your rights into a paper contract and expecting one day to have to enforce that in court and spending a lot of money on lawyers, you just work with a smart contract developer, and what they'll put into the NFT, so actually encoded into the token, are your rights. So if you're the artist and you want to own that digital content forever, you can put, for instance, 10 or 20% royalties every time that is ever sold in perpetuity. No longer ever again will we have an artist that sells their first works for hundreds of dollars, and then later in their life, they're still a starving artist and people are selling their paintings for millions of dollars. They will always get to participate in the growing value of their art and content, which is really exciting. I think that's especially proven true this past year with a lot of collectibles. The people that first released these and now they have massive trading volume, they're earning money every time something is traded and sold for the first time ever, which I think is really great. And especially for musicians who have had some of the worst exploitation, I would say, out of any artist, where, you know, it's nearly impossible to track and trace every time someone is playing music. Like that's what the whole Taylor Swift or Spotify case was about, that artists are never told how often people are actually listening to their music and they're not paid properly. All of this is now written onto a blockchain. So every time your music is listened to and accessed, every time it's used for an advertisement, that is tracked and traced and you're paid immediately and automatically. So I think that's one of the coolest things. And it really like combines technology and law in a way that just, you know, for me is really exciting, because I'm a massive law dork working in the technology space. So that's what I really think is like the huge thing about NFTs there. And so to address your question about what I see as the future. So this, I think, is one of the most important things for me to land the plane with for everyone, which is what digital ownership could actually do. So the whole time we've been using technology, our entire lives, what people have been giving away for free is so incredibly valuable in today's times, where data makes decisions for us and for every organization, private or public, all around the world. Data is the lifeblood of every company, organization, and government. If you are not using data to make decisions, you're not doing something right. And that's just the way that it is. And with the development of data science, advanced predictive analytics, smart cities infrastructure, AI, we're going to see data become more and more valuable and more important. And we as individuals will have more opportunities to become data inputs into algorithms that are really running the way that the world works. And that is valuable. Don't let Mark Zuckerberg tell you otherwise. So the amount of money that you could potentially make, even just by having fractionalized ownership of the value of your data. I'm not saying you need to own 100% of it, because someone has spent time and investment to build the technologies that are collecting the data sets. So I recognize that, that's fine. But even if we just earned a data dividend popularized by, you know, me, Andrew Yang, Governor Gavin Newsom of California, we're all obsessed with this concept of the data dividend, which is that you can earn a small percentage of what your data is worth. And what that means is that you could automatically be paid every single day at least enough money to buy your groceries with. And that is something that today, right now, with the technologies that exist, is already possible. So at a time when, even in the United States alone, we have over 30% unemployment, and that means 30% of our country doesn't know how to buy their groceries and how to protect their individual rights and protect their families. The idea of data ownership is the only valid proposal that we have globally that can cure extreme poverty. It means everyone that has a device can earn enough value on their device to make sure that you can at least feed yourself every day. And that is revolutionary. That's what this is all about for me, because I come from the human rights background, which is, you know, you can say that you have the human right, you know, to food and clean water, but if you can't purchase it, most of the time, no one's going to give it to you. So data ownership is a way to actually change that, and change it easily and change it immediately and quickly. We're not waiting for stimulus checks. We earn enough digital money on our phone to go and scan that at the grocery store and check out and go home with that food to our family, right? So that's what this is about for me. And the more people understand that, I think the more valid this policy proposal becomes. And we're starting to get there. I'm so excited that, people are starting to understand that NFTs and, the crypto industry are growing at such a substantial rate, and really, becoming mass adopted earlier than even some of the most bullish crypto people thought. So I think we're getting there. I think that especially, the acceleration of economic disparity and the breakdown of systems around the world has accelerated this. And, while I would have never wished the past year upon anyone, I think that these broken systems can be rebuilt into something that is much more efficient, equitable, and, systems that actually protect and empower us. So thank you guys for having me.